We become a destination workplace when we give people their ideal job doing meaningful work for a great boss. We studied and analyzed more than 200 research studies and articles on why people quit, why people move to a new organization, while also looking at decades of hiring and employment data. And we can say with conviction that if you have people in their ideal job doing meaningful work for a great boss, not only are you more likely to attract talent and keep talent, but everything you care about in your organization levels up, because those are also the conditions that spark commitment.
Helping you create loyal customers and loyal employees, all through the power of simplicity. This is the Simple Brand Podcast, now heard around the world, including Circle Pines, Minnesota. I'm your host, Matt Lyles, and this week I'm talking with Joe Mull. Joe's an international keynote speaker. He's the founder of the BossBetter Leadership Academy, and he's the host of the BossBetter Now podcast. And Joe's the author of one of the most talked about upcoming HR and workplace culture books, Employalty: How to Ignite Commitment and Keep Top Talent in the New Age of Work. Employalty comes out on May 9th, but it's already getting so much buzz and so many great reviews. And I've had a chance to read it too. Thanks again, Joe. Trust me when I say that if you're a leader who wants to learn how to recruit, retain, and reinvigorate the best employees, you'll definitely want to go ahead and pre-order this book. Joe and I discuss his lessons from Employalty all around turning your organization into a destination workplace to attract and keep top talent. And we walk through Joe's simple framework that helps you create the kind of employee experience that leads people to join a company, stay long-term, and do great work. So here it is. Here's my interview with Joe Mull. Hi, Joe. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Matt, thanks for having me, man. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited about this. Congratulations on Employalty.
Thank you. And you get bonus points for saying it correctly, because it's been a little bit of an adventure. When we named the book, we thought Employalty was pretty straightforward, but we've gotten Employalty and employability, and for everybody listening, he nailed that. I didn't tee him up ahead of time.
Well, when I first saw the book, I thought, "Ooh, wait, do I know that word? Is that a really smart word that I don't know yet?" And then realizing, oh wow, it's a what do you refer to it? It's a portmanteau. Is that right?
You hit it, yeah. And that is far and away the fanciest word in the book, right? Portmanteau, I believe.
Oh.
If we're going with the French,
I'm from Alabama.
I call it a Frankenword.
Yeah.
It is. It's a Frankenword.
And hopefully with this, people will know how to say it correctly once they hear this episode. Well, when I first saw the book, I thought, okay, cool. Employee loyalty. And how can we generate loyalty from our employees? But then when I dug into the book, and as anyone who's listening in or reading the book will attest, Employalty really isn't about just employee loyalty, right?
You've got it. So, and we sort of play a trick on the reader, right? We get you to pick up the book, whether you're in an airport bookstore or you encounter it on Amazon, because of that word, Employalty, because so many folks are struggling to find and keep devoted employees in the here and now. But Employalty is really a portmanteau of employer loyalty and humanity. Because what we know is that right now there's a massive recalibration taking place around how work fits into people's lives. And if you want to be an organization that can find and keep devoted employees, we have to create a more humane employee experience. And the word Employalty gives us a shortcut way to kind of talk about that idea.
Yeah. Well, so when we think about what's happening right now, it seems like we're experiencing record-setting job switching, staffing shortages. What's really driving all this?
Yeah, I think we're at this moment in time where there's sort of the world before COVID and there's the world after COVID. And for some of us, it's almost like we don't even remember the world before COVID. But, burnout was at an all-time high in the workplace before anybody ever heard of the coronavirus. And we worked here in the US more hours a week than every other industrialized nation on earth before COVID. We take fewer vacation days a year than every other developed country on earth. And that was true before COVID. And so it's easy to think that the staffing challenges we're facing right now are all born out of the pandemic, but this actually has been a trend that started since the Great Recession in 2008. We've seen record numbers of people who have voluntarily changed jobs, and that number has gone up every single year since 2009. And we know, just like you said, Matt, that it's not people quitting, it's people switching, right? That's the kind of biggest mischaracterization of the Great Resignation, this term that's getting thrown around so much, is that term is only half the movie. People aren't quitting, they're switching. And we know that's true because as the number of people switching jobs has gone up, then the amount of hiring has gone up too. And so across the board, for more than a decade, we've seen people pursuing new and different opportunities at work.
Well, then, so if job switching is happening and hiring is going up, there's still that mindset around staffing shortages. Like, I can't find good people. So what do you think's driving that?
So it's really easy to think that this is a problem that is about people maybe not wanting to work, right? We've all heard the trope, no one wants to work anymore, which I found a researcher in Canada who says this is the most tired, biased, baseless generational trope in human history. He actually found examples of this going back in newspapers more than 120 years. Right. And when you have a job market that is saturated with opportunity, and you have a decade of people being overworked and underpaid, followed by a global pandemic that took an exhausted workforce and then broke it even further, you get this sort of perfect storm of upgrading. And that's what really is happening when you think about the switching. People are looking for an upgrade in one way or another to their quality of life. When I go and do, conference keynotes or trainings or workshops, and I ask the audience, how many of you here know somebody who switched jobs in the past year or two? And almost every hand goes up.
Of course.
And then when I ask people, why are they switching? We get dozens of answers, right? People want better pay. They want a more flexible schedule, a better commute, a better boss, more fulfilling work. I could give you a dozen answers, but I see them all as the same answer. They roll up to this bigger idea of quality of life, right? People are looking for their job to fit into their life in a much better way. And they're tired of their work encroaching on every corner of their life. And so that's really what's been driving this for so long. And it's not born out of COVID. It was actually born out of so many organizations overloading employees and underpaying them for quite a long time.
Wow, that's it. Yeah, and myself, I made the shift. I switched my job pre-COVID, and I decided while I loved much of the work I was doing, I wanted to seek a different, better quality of life and what that meant for me by going and working for myself. And I was able to seek that, but I think that I now work for the worst boss I ever had in my career.
Isn't it funny? So I'm in the same boat. I started my own business 10 years ago. I never aspired to run my own business, but I run out of bed in the morning to go to work. I'm working harder and more hours and putting in more effort than I ever have in anything in my life. But that's because I've been able to design the right employee, if you will, experience for me. I'm doing work that's fulfilling in service to a purpose or a cause that I really believe in. I'm able to write my own ticket financially if I want. There's so much that comes with these certain kinds of conditions that we all know activate emotional and psychological commitment. And what we get from being self-employed actually gives us a little bit of easier access to them than John Q or Jane Q employee in the workplace who may have less influence over some of those conditions.
That's true. And that speaks to the fact that it's not just a blanket statement of everyone is looking for this exact type of experience. I think everyone's looking for a better quality of life based on what it means to them as individuals.
Well, and you said something a few minutes ago that's a really important reframe, which is everybody wants to talk about there being a staffing shortage, but the right mindset is that there is no staffing shortage. There's a great job shortage. That's really what's happening. When you have an oversaturated employee market where there's just way more jobs than there are people to fill those jobs, people are more selective. They're able to look for
Right.
those upgrades. So I can sit here and I can say, wow, we have on average about 8 million unfilled jobs in the US economy. And we're adding between 250,000 and 500,000 new jobs to that number every single month. But how many of those are great jobs? How many of those provide a financial circumstance that lifts people out of poverty or allows them to pay their bills and have a little left over? How many of those jobs provide people the flexibility they need to be at their kids' soccer games or be the primary caregiver to an elderly parent? How many of those jobs provide fulfilling work that aligns with my strengths in an inclusive environment for a great boss? These are all of the conditions that go in, that sort of bake into the pie that make a great job that people are upgrading for. That's where the shortage is.
Yeah, I think so. And that leads to something that you distinguish in your book. You distinguish between what you term as a departure organization versus a destination workplace. And so I would expect that at least most leaders want to run an organization that's deemed a destination workplace. But how can they know? How can they assess and know whether they're leading a destination workplace, and what can they do to turn it into one?
Well, thank you for asking. And when we wrote this book, we really wanted to give people that blueprint, right? Because it's not enough to just ask your employees, hey, what do you need that you're not getting? They may not always know. And then even if they know, they may not always tell you.
Right.
But we need to be able to provide a simple answer to the question, where does commitment come from at work? What are people looking for that leads them to join and stay and care and try? And it's why I think this conversation is such a perfect fit for your podcast, Matt, because we need to simplify it, right? We don't serve leaders and organizations well if everybody has to memorize a doctoral dissertation's amount of research to pay attention to the things that we all need to pay attention to as leaders and business owners. So I'm going to give this to you in one sentence. We become a destination workplace when we give people their ideal job doing meaningful work for a great boss. We studied and analyzed more than 200 research studies and articles on why people quit, why people move to a new organization, while also looking at decades of hiring and employment data. And we can say with conviction that if you have people in their ideal job doing meaningful work for a great boss, not only are you more likely to attract talent and keep talent, but everything you care about in your organization levels up, because those are also the conditions that spark commitment.
Love that. And thank you for simplifying that. What ideal job, meaningful work, great boss. So when it comes to those three factors, what happens if an employee only experiences one or just two out of those three?
Yeah, the way I describe it is that every employee in every job and every company on the planet has this kind of internal scorecard that they're walking around with. And if you can check most or all of the boxes on that scorecard, the likelihood of them staying and being a devoted member of your team is pretty high. But the more sort of red X's you place next to the dimensions of these factors, the more likely it is that they're going to start to look around, or their commitment will wane, and ultimately they'll leave. Or even worse, they check out and then they stay, right? Hashtag quiet quitting. That's what everybody's talking about right now. But when you have someone who, for them, the circumstances of their life require a financial improvement, that dimension of ideal job may be a little bit more important, because ideal job is really about what I get in exchange for what I do. And the three dimensions we write about in the book are compensation, flexibility, and workload. And if my job fits into my life the way that a puzzle piece snaps into place, with my money, my workload, and my flexibility around when, where, and how I get to work, that can supercharge my commitment, because that's not something everybody gets. Conversely, the other two factors of meaningful work and great boss may carry greater significance for other folks. So I write in the book about a woman who took a job as an activities director at a long-term care facility, and who accepted that job with very low pay because she felt called to do that kind of work. And at that stage in her life, that's what was most important to her and what was most likely to activate her commitment. But then that circumstance changes if she, for example, has a kid and now needs more flexibility in her schedule. So those three factors, ideal job, meaningful work, and great boss, they all work together to create a destination workplace. But that internal scorecard that people have may have some kind of bigger and smaller emphasis on some aspects of those factors.
Yeah, that makes sense. And, a lot of times when leaders want to really simplify things, they just place an equal weighting on something like that and say, okay, every employee gets the exact same thing. It's like giving your employees a t-shirt and everybody gets a size small.
Right. And unironically, a direct supervisor's ability to connect with their direct report and understand what's most important to them and adjust the circumstances of that person's job accordingly is going to go a long way to making that person a great boss, which it turns out is one of the factors of being a destination workplace.
That's right. It's all tied together.
That's right.
You talked about humanity and making a more humane employee experience. So what's happened with most work environments that have made them so broken and dehumanized?
Yeah, and thank you for using the right word. We wrote in the book. I keep saying we on these interviews, Matt. I wrote the book. Why do I keep saying we? I have this wonderful team of people that has been helping me for years run my business, but I guess I'm trying to give them credit when I say we. But I'll say we and me. How's that?
It's good, but I will say this, and I've been recognizing this a lot lately, is that everything that I do in my business, whether it's even preparing for podcast interviews, the writing that I do, the videos that I make, there's always a team of people behind me. Sometimes it's just either mentors or other peers who I'll sit down and have lunch with, and they'll review something I've done, and they'll say, "Well, have you thought about including this, or have you done this, or here's what I did." So I always think, even if we're solopreneurs, it's still we.
Absolutely. I say, and I feel like when I say we, I'm sorry, I completely went in another direction here.
That's great.
But when I say we, it's like, it's a shout out to my wife who ran everything so that I could disappear for giant chunks of time to write. And it's a shout out to Jamie and Frank and Tiffany on my team and everything that they did to keep the world running, and to my mother-in-law who was getting the kids off the bus. So sorry if it sounds weird that I say we, but it's sort of a mental habit now.
No, that's fantastic. There's always a we.
There's always a we. Anyway, thank you for the detour. To your question about dehumanization. So we know that over the years, workplaces really in every industry have slowly embraced policies and systems and procedures that in one way or another treat people like a commodity and ignore the fact that they are fully formed human beings outside of work with a life and with families and with goals and interests. And so we have right now workplaces that continue to perpetuate these experiences that rob people of their humanity, and they're so normalized that we don't even pay attention to them anymore. We don't even think of them as harmful. And I'll give you a couple examples.
Yeah.
For example, if you work in the restaurant industry, in some places it is not uncommon to get your schedule for next week at the end of this week. And that's absurd. How are you supposed to live your life or plan to take care of your kids or your family or volunteer or serve on the PTO if you don't know when you're working next week, right? That ignores the humanity of the person behind the position. If you are in an organization where you promise employees a certain number of hours every week and then they don't get them because, oh, well, we're not as busy or we don't need folks, well, then that's dehumanizing as well, because how am I supposed to meet my financial obligations and plan my life if I don't know what my income levels are? I'll give you one more example because this is sort of a pet peeve of mine. And that is telling people whether they can sit or stand and whether or not, or excuse me, when they can go to the bathroom. So, we have policies and procedures in places in some organizations. I know some folks who work at a grocery store. They are not allowed to sit when they're ringing groceries, and they have to ask permission to go to the bathroom. And you know what, Matt? We reserve policies like that for people who sit on the bottom half of the socioeconomic ladder. Can you imagine telling an accountant that they can only go to the bathroom twice a day and they need to ask first? The truth is that I am not going to be turned off by buying groceries from your grocery store if the 65-year-old woman ringing my groceries is sitting on a stool.
Right. I might even appreciate that brand and appreciate that store even more, recognizing, oh, you know what? Like they're actually treating her pretty well. So I do appreciate that.
We need organizations to kind of take that step back and say, are the systems and the policies and the procedures that we have in place here, Are they an acknowledgement that every person that works here has a life outside of work? And how do we optimize the work experience to improve that quality of life? When you do that, you're not going to have a hard time finding and keeping people.
I would assume that's the case. But when you hear people talking about this type of environment and talking about how dehumanizing it is, a lot of times you'll have leaders that say, well, people are just lazy. So what would you say to a leader that just simply says, well, someone that doesn't want to work in that environment or someone who doesn't want to work this job, they're just lazy. It's not me, it's them.
Yeah, I write a lot in the book about what I call the myth of lazy, which is the belief that most of our problems are rooted in an issue around work ethic. And we know that people generally are willing to do hard things when it's worthwhile to them to do so, when they see that what they're doing makes a difference in the lives of others, or when they see that what they're doing results in them being valued and rewarded and respected and included. Let me put that in a more simple way of saying it, which is that people generally do a great job when they believe they have a great job. And so if you can ask yourself, for whatever business you run, what would make this place the very best place to be a blank? And then whatever that position title is that you're trying to fill, or that hard to fill position group that you have in an organization, that is the first question that can really get us to the root of where do we need to innovate our employee experience? And that's why I was really intentional in describing this as a great job shortage, because when we stop blaming people, because we really want this to be the narrative, people are lazy, work ethic is a problem, no one wants to work anymore. But there's no data to support that, right? Unemployment is at record lows here in the US. There have only been 3 months where there have been fewer people unemployed in the US than there are right now. And if we gave every unemployed person in the US a job right now, there would still be 4 million unfilled jobs tomorrow. And so there is no invisible mass of people who are sitting on the sidelines. This is not about work ethic. What we know is that if you create a great job, if you turn the mirror inward and stop trying to blame people, but start solving problems internally to create a better employee experience, not only are you going to attract talent, not only are your best folks going to stay, but they're going to tell the other people in their network about what it's like to work in your organization, where they get an ideal job, meaningful work, great boss, and then they're doing the recruiting for you.
Well, and when I was reading your book, thinking through that and thinking about some of the stories where someone decided, oh, let's increase the pay to here. Let's increase autonomy to this point. And it got me thinking around Pareto's law, Pareto principle, where you will fill up whatever space you have. And I don't know if you looked into this or not, and I don't know if there's science or any research that backs this up. But to me, I think there's a good theory that says if you increase pay to a certain level, if you increase the overall job to a certain level, then employees, for the most part, will rise to the occasion to fill that new role that's been created for them.
Absolutely. There's so much truth to that across many of the dimensions that we're talking about. So let me kind of fill this out so that I don't sound like a blabbering idiot in the middle of our conversation. So I rattled off earlier that ideal job has 3 dimensions to it, which is compensation, workload, and flexibility. Meaningful work has 3 dimensions to it as well: purpose, strengths, and belonging, right? When people get to do work that they believe is purposeful, that matters, when they get to do work that aligns with their strengths, and when they get to do work in an environment where they belong, that supercharges meaningful work, this idea that my work is fulfilling and I want to do it. And then great boss has 3 dimensions to it as well. And, we can have a long conversation about leadership, and there are a lot of things we need to get right in order for someone to call us a great boss. But the 3 things that might be the most important are trust, coaching, and advocacy, right? Do I grant and earn trust? Do I engage in coaching conversations with my direct reports? And do I act as an advocate for my folks? Do I act in their best interests? Do I care about them as a person outside of work? So all of these 9 dimensions essentially make up that kind of internal scorecard that we were talking about earlier. And when you elevate the consistency of those experiences for people, whether it's increasing pay to the point of becoming generous pay, increasing flexibility to where people get more autonomy and influence over where and when and how they work, increasing trust, that factor, that dimension of that great boss factor. Right. You create an environment that pushes the buttons and pulls the levers for emotional and psychological commitment. And it can be hard. I mean, we're working against a lot of sort of institutional muscle memory here, right? We're so used to, in work environments, trying to figure out how do we get by on the minimum staffing threshold? How do we keep our costs down for compensation? How do we give people very detailed steps about exactly how to do what we want them to do? But those all send a very specific kind of message to workers, right? We don't trust you, and we want you to be here as cheaply as possible. But if you flip that around the other way and say, we do trust you, and we're willing to invest in you, it's human nature to turn around and reinvest effort back into an organization that treats us that way.
Yeah, it's like there's a reciprocity.
Yes.
Is that the right word?
Reciprocity. Yes. It's funny you say that because it's one of the first words I use in the book. And when we talk about that two-way street, that commitment is, right? How do I treat people here so well that it would never occur to them to want to go work anywhere else?
Right. And if they do, it's not so much from a desire to leave, but from a different desire, maybe.
That's right. Absolutely. And we know that a lot of folks who look around for a new opportunity, sometimes they do it because they come to believe that the grass is greener on the other side. And what we're seeing now, if you're hearing about boomerang employees, or some people are writing about the great regret, where people who left a job are coming back to old jobs, in some cases, it's really about promises unkept. It's about organizations who said, we were going to give you many of the things that we've been talking about, Matt, more flexibility or better pay, or you're going to work for this great boss. And then I get there and I don't experience those things. And I realize that the culture I was a part of and the people that I worked with and the experience I had at my old job really was better in a lot of ways. And so sometimes, people need to go out in order to appreciate what they had and come back.
Oh, you don't know what you got till it's gone.
That's right. It sounds like a song title.
I want to talk about some of the different factors in here and some of the benefits that you've talked about. And one of my favorites of these is flexibility. So how is flexibility valuable? And is it as simple as just allowing employees to decide on the hours that they want to work?
Yeah. So thank you for getting to the nuance of this, because as a category, flexibility is the number one most requested workplace benefit in the world now across the globe. According to the Society for Human Resources Management, this is the number one benefit that people are asking for, either to stay or when they look for a new opportunity. But what we're getting wrong about this is that in many places, we just equate flexibility with some form of remote work. And yes, we know that more people than ever before want the opportunity to work from home. We have data that tells us an overwhelming majority of people in nearly every industry category expect that they should be able to work from home some of the time. And this is even for jobs that you don't think of as having a work from home option, like flight attendant or plumber. But we see people saying that there are other things in my job with, training or education, meetings, things like that I might like to be able to complete from home. However, when we talk about flexibility, we have to push past the instinct to make it entirely about work from home. Flexibility is really about giving people some choice, some influence over how their job fits into their life. And so flexibility in an organization might be, like you said, when I work. Maybe it's about the start time or the end time of my shift, or what days of the week I work. Maybe it's about the length of my shift. Maybe it's about where I work in the building. Maybe it's about who I share space with, or the kind of work I do, or the team that I'm a part of. Maybe it's the classification of my job. We've seen a lot of organizations been able to retain talent by giving people the option not to have a 40-hour work week, but to maybe have a 36-hour work week and still retain full-time pay and benefits. Because now all of a sudden, I can get my kids off the bus because of the nature of my schedule and my partner's work schedule. And so flexibility is not just about remote, it's about giving back to employees some power for them to fit their job into their life in the way that makes most sense for them.
Yeah. And then having that power is just one more thing that I think helps them improve the quality of their life. however it means to them.
Right. And we know that organizations struggle with this because here's what I want people to understand. This is not an all or nothing proposition, right? You don't have to go from having no flexibility to telling employees, do whatever you want. There is incrementalism here. And your employees, if you are explicit with your intentions, are going to see you for what you are trying to do. If you pull your team together and say, hey, we know flexibility is important. We know this is something you long for, but we still need to have the front desk staffed Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. So how about we put our heads together and come up with some things that we can test and try that would give you the flexibility that you're looking for while also making sure that we maintain coverage. And you may get some incredible ideas back from the people on that team. And because you're doing it as a team, you're problem solving together. And so they're going to buy in to any of the boundaries or limitations that you have to put around some of these policies because they recognize that, yes, you're trying to give us flexibility, but we also have a business to run.
Right. And I think a lot of leaders are hesitant to do that sometimes because they're afraid. They say, you know what, once we do this, once we open up this door, we can't close the door back. And when we do open up the door, the employees are just going to take advantage of us. Mm-hmm. But you had a really cool story in the book and forgive me, I can't remember the exact company, but it was the group of HVAC workers. Yes. And their leader said, here's the new flexibility that I want you to have. Now, we still have to meet all these specific requirements in every single month. And the moment that we don't meet those requirements, we're going to go back to the old way. There's always that option.
And this gentleman was the head of facilities for a healthcare system in Kentucky. And boy, Matt, if you've ever had the experience where the universe just sends you a gift, I'm in the throes of writing the book, and I'm searching for the stories that really take home and illustrate the concepts, sort of proof of concept for some of the ideas in the book. And one of them was around flexibility. And I'm in Kentucky doing a full day leadership masterclass for this umbrella network of federally qualified health centers across the state. And we spent some time in the morning talking about flexibility, and we break for lunch. And this gentleman comes over to me. His name is Jack, and he sits down at the table and he says, I have to tell you a story. And he tells me the story that's now in the book about this HVAC team in the hospital that he gave complete and total autonomy to set the department schedule for all the employees, and how it absolutely transformed everything they were doing. It transformed how he would lead teams for the rest of his life. And I'm sitting there thinking, please, God, let this man give me permission to share this story in the book, because these are the kinds of innovations that I know leaders make in organizations of every size, the kind of accommodations that they make in order to give teams the flexibility that results in them having higher levels of commitment. And he's sitting in front of me, just absolutely giving me this incredible gift. And so I asked him if he'd be willing to sit for an interview so I can get some more detail and then share that story in the book. And he was so gracious about it, and really allowed me to paint a fun picture of that story unfolding in his organization.
That's an example of a concrete story, real people that can let other leaders reading this book know, hey, this stuff works and you can do it too.
Yep. And every time he tried this approach of turning over more control to the team around when and where and how people worked, other people in the organization would say, well, that's not going to work here. That's not going to work in this division. It can't possibly work. And he would just say, we'll see. And then it did.
Yeah. It's okay to test and learn. It's okay to try it out.
As long as you're explicit about your intent, which is, yes, I want to do something here that gives you what you're looking for, because I know that it matters. And I know, and this is what he told his HVAC team, which is, I can't compete on salary with some of the other organizations in town who can employ you. Right. But those organizations are having you work overtime and weekends and you have no life. I can give you a life. I can't give you the financial package that they can give you, but I can give you your life back. So if you want to pick up extra contracting hours on the side, or if you want to spend more time coaching Little League for your kids, that's possible if we can move to this model. And it ended up winning for them.
And there you go. And it's a lesson in your book that others can do too.
Right.
Well, so I want to talk about meaningful work for a moment, because a lot of times when we think about meaningful work, we tend to think of, working for certain companies where companies are purpose-driven, they're doing great work. I used to live in Memphis, and so meaningful work to me meant, St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital.
Yes.
Now I'm in Nashville, 15 minutes away from Dave Ramsey's organization and the meaningful work that they do. So I'm curious about what if a leader thinks, well, I'm in an industry where the work that we do really isn't that meaningful. How do I make it meaningful to my employees?
Yeah. Well, we know that one way you connect people to purpose is through storytelling. And this is a skill that leaders need to develop. We need to learn how to create line of sight between even the most mundane tasks and duties of someone's job to the difference that service or that work or just even that routine that people are in makes in the lives of others. And so we've got a few stories in the book about what this looks like. But I am a big fan of talking about what I've always thought of as my fallback job. I've always said if there ever comes a time when I want a mindless job, I'm going to go become a ticket taker at the movie theater.
Oh.
Right? The guy or the lady who stands there when you walk up with your tickets and they just tear it, and then they go on your right, on your left, theater 5. Right? I think that's got to be a great job, right? Because you get free popcorn, maybe you get to see some movies and you're in the air conditioning all summer, right? Plus, talk about stability. I mean, what would possibly make all the movie theaters close down? I mean, come on.
Not so fast.
Not so fast, my friends. That's right. But we know that even a job such as that, which on the surface might feel kind of mindless, really does make a difference in the lives of others. And so if I were a movie theater owner or a manager and I hired some teenager to stand there and tear those tickets. Early on in their employment, I'm going to pull that person aside and I'm going to ask them, do you know a couple who's been married for a really long time? And they'll probably, hopefully tell me yes. I'm going to ask them to go ask that couple to describe their first date and come back and tell me about it. And when they come back and tell me about it, I'm going to say, isn't it remarkable that that couple can remember so many details from a night that happened so many years ago? Well, guess what, man? Every single person walking past you might be in the middle of the night that they're going to be telling their grandkids about.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to send them to go find a set of young parents that have kids under the age of 5. And then I'm going to ask them to ask those young parents, when was the last time you went to a movie without the kids? And what would it take to be able to go to a movie without the kids? And that person's going to come back. I got 3 kids under the age of 13, so I know this piece well, right? Yeah. I'm out $50 before I pull out of the driveway if I want a babysitter, right? For 3 kids to go to a 2-hour movie. And so, hey, man, every person walking past you might be one of these folks who had to kind of move heaven and earth just to get 2 hours to themselves to come to the movies. And we get to be a part of that. And isn't that cool, right? You get to create line of sight between even the most mundane tasks and duties of a job and the way that it makes a difference in the lives of others. And so stories is a big part of this. The other part of this too is recognition, Matt. And we talk about recognition a lot in the book and about how we tend to do recognition wrong. Oftentimes, we want recognition to be about the gift. And what we celebrate in most organizations tends to be tenure. 83% of recognition programs in companies across the globe, the primary form of recognition is tenure, years served. Which, if you're doing it once a year, that means people are only getting recognition once a year. And you're not even really recognizing people for their contributions. You're just recognizing them for being there. And so in that way, they're no different than the coffee maker that's sitting in the break room, right? Which is still there doing its job.
You can give a certificate to the printer that's been there for 5 years.
That's right. That's right. Thank you, copy machine. You've been killing it. Yeah, but we need to teach leaders that the best kind of recognition expresses specifically the difference that someone's work or skill makes in the lives of others. Now, others can be customers, but it doesn't always have to be. Others can be a teammate. Others can be the boss. Hey, because you took this on, boy, it really freed up time for me to go over here and do this other thing. And that was so valuable to me, and I want to thank you for that. We have to teach leaders that going to their teams and saying, thank you, I appreciate you, great job, that's all important, but it rarely goes far enough to make a difference. What we need to say is, hey, I want to thank you because I noticed that every time one of our elderly patients gets ready to leave the doctor's office, you get up from behind the front desk and you walk out and help them put their coat on. And nobody's ever told you to do that. But man, that is just such a thoughtful thing. And I notice it every time. And it just means the world to them and me. So thank you for that. Being noticed is a key ingredient of meaningful work because people just want to matter.
That's it. Everyone wants to matter. Everyone wants to feel valued. And when they recognize that those specific actions are valued, they're going to keep doing them.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, I want to touch on one more factor from this framework. When we think of the different types of bosses that are out there, there are good bosses and there's not so good bosses, but then there are great bosses. And I think one of the things that great bosses do is show advocacy, and they are advocates for their employees. Talk to me about the value of advocacy.
Right. So advocacy sort of has become my catch-all word for caring about the person outside of work and acting in ways that are congruent with that being the priority, their humanity being the priority. So if you think about what an advocate does, it's somebody who acts in the best interests of another. And so as an advocate, I don't just care about the work, I care about the person's life outside of work. I don't just care about who they are when they're with us in this job. I care about their career and the way in which this job fits into their long-term career plans or goals. It means that I'm advocating for my employees and putting myself between them and the powers that be when needed to get them the information or the materials or the equipment that they need to be able to do their jobs, to prevent, the insert expletive here from rolling downhill, right, in organizations, which we like to say sometimes, so that they can do their work without being distracted by things that don't matter. Advocacy is as simple as paying attention to what people tell you is important to them, remembering it, and talking about it again and again. So if somebody tells you that, hey, I'm taking my kid to go visit colleges this weekend, and then the following week you say, hey, how was that trip? That's got to be stressful, right? Because you're excited for them, but it's also like, oh, they're leaving the nest and that's a whole new transition. And how are you doing with all of that? That's caring about the person inside the employee and the life that they have outside of work. And we do this really well when we allow that employee to set the boundaries that they're most comfortable with. Because some of your employees are going to be willing to sit down and give you a 35-minute reply to that question about all the emotional circumstances that are tied up in taking their kid to visit colleges. Right. And somebody else on the team may not really want to talk to you about that at all. And all of that is okay. We just have to give them a clear picture that we care, and we do that through advocacy.
Yeah, that's it. And we've talked about advocacy, meaningful work, all flexibility, all these different things. And I think that it comes down to recognizing and valuing your people as the individual human beings that they are.
Absolutely. One of the things that I wrote in the book is that the era of trying to hire the best person for the job is over. And that we've been doing this for a long time. But what we have to do now is create the best job for the person. We are living in a moment where there is more opportunity than ever before for people to choose their own path, to choose their own circumstance. And so if you want to keep the talented people in your organization, you've got to create an environment that leads them to pick you every day, not just over another opportunity, but over every other opportunity. Because this trajectory that we're on, Matt, where there's just more jobs than there are people to fill them, and organizations trying to engineer a better employee experience, it's expected to continue, right? This idea of the Great Resignation and staffing shortages, it's not an event, it's an era. It's been a decade long. It's expected to continue. And if we want to get better at finding and keeping devoted employees, we have to create that kind of a more humane employee experience.
And when we do that, it's not so much that we're losing power as leaders. We're not losing power. We're not giving much more to our employees. It's like there's a big downstream effect to this. There's a benefit to everyone when we do this.
Right. And it feels transactional at first, right? Okay, if I'm going to give you better pay and I'm going to give you more flexibility and I'm going to give you this, I expect in return that you're going to give me even more effort and more commitment and you're going to stay longer. And that's because it is in a way transactional at first. But when you get it right, it becomes transformational for everybody involved. Because when I, as an employee, look around and say, wow, this job fits into my life in the perfect way, I'm doing meaningful work for a great boss, they go, let's go. It's like they've won the lottery, and they move from I have to do this work to I want to do this work. And when commitment goes up, you become impenetrable to poaching when people are checking all those boxes on their scorecard. The level of quality and service and interaction with customers, all those things go up. And then every metric that you care about in your organization goes up. Reputation, revenue, retention, turnover, all of it. And so when we talk about creating a more humane employee experience, it can sound altruistic or it can sound kind of squishy, right? It sounds like a soft idea, but it's absolutely not. There are capitalistic reasons to invest in every one of these experiences for employees because it's the entry fee to a more committed workforce with higher levels of retention who turn around, easy for me to say, and create a better product or service.
There you go. And it creates a win-win, win-win-win-win experience.
It makes work for all.
Yes.
Employees, employers, business partners, customers, everybody that you care about that intersects with your organization.
Everybody. All right. Well, Joe, last question for you. If you were to create a 5-song soundtrack for Employalty, what songs would you choose?
Oh, this was hard. I so appreciate that you sent this ahead of time. And I spent like an hour on this morning, and I was struggling for a little while. But I chose 5 songs to try to elevate some of the ideas that we talk about here in the book. So here we go. The first song that I chose was 9 to 5 by Dolly Parton, which just perfectly captures the experience that so many have at work and kind of what a lot of people are trying to get out of, right? The second song I picked was, go with me on this here, Matt, Cats in the Cradle by Harry Chapin. Now, I know this feels a little bit dark, but go with me on this, okay? It's a cautionary tale, right? The song, for anybody listening, it's an older song if you don't know it. The song is about a kid who keeps asking his dad to play with him and spend time with him through the years, and the dad's working constantly and never does. And then later in life, the dad's trying to visit his son and spend time with his son, and the kid can't because he's constantly working. And it's a reminder of what's at stake, right? Yeah. No one wants to look back on their life and realize that they spent time on the wrong things. And when employers help employees get access to what's most important to them, they join and they stay and they care and they try. So I chose Cats in the Cradle because it's a reminder of what's at stake.
Oh, I can't listen to that song or now I guess even like a song without crying.
And I have I have 3 kids, 2 sons, and I know that every time I have to say no to something, like I have that moment, it's like, oh no, daddy has to work. Oh, and it's just that horrible agony of feeling like, am I striking the right balance? Am I saying no too often? Yeah, I feel that too, my friend. All right. The third song is My Hero by the Foo Fighters. So I had to get a Foo Fighters song in here because I'm a big Foo Fighters fan. And My Hero is about the extraordinary potential of common people. And on our podcast, BossBetter Now, we call our listeners boss heroes. We say that anybody who goes to work every day and tries to create the conditions at work for people to thrive, even if you don't always know how, that makes you a boss hero. And any leader who goes to work and tries to create those conditions for people, that's an act of service. It's an act of sacrifice. You're subjugating at times your own time and sanity and needs in service to creating those conditions for others. And so that makes you a boss hero. So go rock out to My Hero by the Foo Fighters. And then I got 2 more. Nonstop from Hamilton.
Oh, yeah.
Are you a Hamilton fan?
I wouldn't consider myself a fan, but I know Hamilton.
All right. So this is the last song in the first act, and it's all about how Hamilton is just prodigious in all of the work that he does. He works crazy hours and he writes like he's running out of time. And I chose this song at a personal level because I do a lot of things like I'm running out of time. And I sometimes have to remember that I don't have to do everything that I think I have to do. But I also know that I love my work. And when you love your work, you really are willing to go nonstop. And that's kind of a part of creating the right conditions for people at work. And then the last one was I Can See Clearly Now by Johnny Nash, right? I've spent 20 years doing this kind of work, Matt. And It took me a long time to distill all that we know about what it takes to motivate employees, all that we know about what it takes to get people to join an organization and to give it all they've got. But I've got it now. I have complete clarity on that. We need to give people their ideal job doing meaningful work for a great boss. We need to attend to those 9 dimensions we just rattled off here in this interview. And when people get their hands on this book, they're going to see clearly now as well. They're going to have that blueprint, and it's going to be a bright, bright, sunshiny day.
That's it. And it is as simple as that. Well, Joe, I love that soundtrack. Lot of different emotions in that soundtrack. I'm going to try to keep it together until I get off the camera. But I have enjoyed learning from you. I've enjoyed learning from your book. I know there's a lot more that people can learn. Where can we go to learn more from you?
Well, thank you for asking, man. My website is my name, Joe Mull, JoeMull.com. You can check out the podcast, BossBetter Now, and would love it if folks listening would grab a copy of Employalty. You can search my name on any book retail site, JoeMull, or Employalty, which is just EMP loyalty, and you'll find it out there in the world.
There you go. And then one more time, just so that everyone understands exactly how to say it, the book is Employalty.
Employalty, how to ignite commitment and keep top talent in the new age of work.
That's it. Joe, thank you so much. I'm so grateful for your time today.
Man, this was a ton of fun. Thank you so much for the invitation. The honor was absolutely mine.
I hope you enjoyed my discussion with Joe Mull. So you can go and learn more from him at joemull.com. You'll find Employalty there, along with lots of resources to help you level up your leadership. And go ahead and pre-order Employalty now so that you can get it as soon as it releases. And if you like listening to Joe today, then you'll definitely want to check out his BossBetter Now podcast. It's all of Joe's lessons to help you become a better leader, all mixed in with just the right amount of encouragement and humor to make it fun. And if you're enjoying the Simple Brand podcast, go ahead and hit the subscribe button, because it's going to make it so much simpler for you to get future episodes like the next one featuring Eric Huberman. Eric's the founder and CEO of Hawk Media. It's the fastest growing marketing consultancy in the US, and they've helped develop marketing strategies for more than 4,000 businesses, many of which you've heard of. Now, helping that many businesses has allowed them to distill their process, along with all their lessons learned, into a methodology for marketing that they call the Hawk Method. Eric and I discussed the Hawk Method, along with what he considers as the 3 principles of marketing that'll help any brand soar, regardless of its budget. So go ahead and subscribe. You'll automatically get Eric's episode as soon as it's live. Until then, keep it simple.